Ακολουθεί ο κύριος Πέτρος Οικονοµίδης, ο τελευταίος ομιλητής μας για σήμερα. Είναι πρόεδρος και διευθύνων σύμβουλος της Felix NBI, βραβευμένος επαγγελματίας στον τομέα του branding και του marketing και θα μας μιλήσει για το θέμα του είναι ένα ισχυρό brand πηγάζει από μέσα μας. Και αμέσως μετά ακολουθούν οι δικές σας ερωτήσεις.
I've learned a lot yesterday and today. It's been quite remarkable. And one of the things I've learned is that there's a lot of forward thinking in this industry. And I think for Tini, it's the result of the speakers that you've gathered together. Extraordinary. I mean, just look at this panel that we've just listened to right now. And I think the same applies to every speaker. So thank you very much indeed for having me here. And thank you very much for putting on such a wonderful, wonderful conference. And I must thank my friend Anita, because it's because of her that I met you, Fortini. And I must thank my girlfriend Maria, because it's because of Maria that I met Anita. So these things are changed, yeah? So when I got on the aeroplane in Athens to come up here, there was a little kid wearing a red T-shirt with Cape Town written on it. Is his mother here? There you go. And I spoke to this kid, because, I mean, it's not every day you see kids with Cape Town on their T-shirt. That's where I went to university, in that beautiful city called Cape Town. And my university was right behind that mountain on the left-hand side, UCT, the University of Cape Town. But even though I was in this beautiful, beautiful city, there was only one place on my mind, and that was New York. I'd made up my mind that I wanted to be a big deal on Madison Avenue. And that's exactly the way I said it to myself. When I said this to my father, he said, "Where the hell is that?" So I explained to him. So what I did was that I started working in South Africa for Pepsi Cola. I then joined McCann Erickson, which at the time was the world's largest global ad agency. The ad agency for Coca-Cola, by the way, Rosa. You know McCann Erickson. And from there, they sent me to Hong Kong. And I was in Hong Kong one day when this fellow calls me from New York, and he says to me, "You're Greek, aren't you?" I said, "Yes," with a name like Οικονοµίδης. He said, "You speak Greek?" I said, "Of course." I couldn't speak a word. And they sent me to Greece as the CEO of McCann Erickson here in Greece. And that's when I ordered salata me bazouria. But I learned. So after a couple of years, I went to Mexico. Of course, I learned Spanish. I was the CEO of McCann Erickson Mexico and also the Senior Vice President for Latin America. And finally, I made it to New York, and I was a big deal on Madison Avenue. There I had the good fortune to run the Coca-Cola worldwide advertising account. My client was a very famous fellow called Sergio Zeman. Rosa, you know him. We used to call him the Ayacola. He was a nasty guy, but he was very good, very smart. This is a book that he wrote in the 90s called The End of Marketing as We Know It. And it's so spot on, because so much of what we talk about in marketing today, he spoke about in the 90s, because marketing has changed radically, believe me, radically. I then moved to an agency called TBWA Worldwide in New York. That, by the way, was started by a guy from Kalamata called Vasilis Dragos. He's the T in TBWA, very famous for its work on Absolute Vodka and all sorts of stuff like that. And there I was worldwide director of client services, and I had the very good fortune of leading the team that did the relaunch of Apple when Steve Jobs went back in 1997. I remind you, Apple was bankrupt. Today, it's worth $3 trillion, the first company ever to reach that kind of value. Behind all of that is culture, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. It's about culture. I wanted to be back here. And I moved back to Greece, to this beautiful city called Athens, and I started up my own brand consultancy called Felix B&I, and today I believe I've got the best of both worlds. I live in Athens, and I work globally. It would be a little better if I lived in Mytilene and worked globally. but it's okay. So let me just talk a bit about what brand is. Here's a definition which comes from the American Marketing Association. The American Marketing Association says it's a name, a term, a design, a symbol, or any other feature that identifies one seller's good or service as distinct from those of other sellers. Okay? What they're talking about is that. That's exactly where the word comes from. Brand in German means fire, to burn. I brand my cattle to distinguish my cattle from your cattle. That's absolute nonsense. That's absolute rubbish. That is a logo that I just showed you. A brand is something else. Brand are the footsteps you leave behind you as you walk through this life. In other words, it's what people think about you. It's your reputation. It's what Aristotle called ethos. What you say, what you don't say, what you do, and what you don't do, everything communicates. And don't ever forget that. It's not about fancy slogans, it's not about clever names, it's not about nice logos or nice bottles or nice labels. Everything communicates. Which means that brand works from the inside out. If we don't all feel it, we will not be consistent. It's impossible. In other words, brand is culture. Simple, very difficult. And it works like this. There are those footprints that I spoke about, which is your reputation. It starts with a belief, a value system, a narrative becomes behavior becomes your reputation. It's the way that people respond to what you do. Very simple. Very difficult. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Peter Drucker. And he's absolutely right. It's all about that, connecting. It's all about that, connecting. But here's the problem. We live in a changing world, and in a changing world, culture is constantly shifting. That's today's biggest leadership challenge. Kodak has disappeared. The Encyclopedia Britannica used to be what Google is today. At school, there was my bank of information. Whenever I wanted to Google something, I'd look at the Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm sure there are other people in this room who know what I'm talking about. However, the shifting culture is also your biggest opportunity. Because in a world that is shifting, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And that's your opportunity, is to anticipate what people don't yet know they want. But this means that you need deep insight into the way that people are thinking and feeling and living. Here's a whole bunch of innovations over the years. It's remarkable how much mankind has invented during this time period. That's 140 years we're looking at. Television, the first motor car, flight, man on the moon, computers, robots, AI, etc., 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 etc. Starbucks, too, by the way. And these are the generations that we commonly refer to. At the bottom is something called the lost generation. I don't know why they call them that. We've then got the greatest generation. Above that, we've got the silent generation. Above that, the baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer, by the way. One step up from that is Generation X. Then we get millennials. Then we get Gen Z. Then we get Gen Alpha. And just to give you some sense of what we're talking about, the silent generation is 77 years and older. Baby boomers are between 58 and 76. Generation X is between 42 and 57. The millennials between 25 and 41. Gen Z is 24, up to 24. And Gen Alpha, God help us. God help us. How many millennials here, by the way? Did you see that, guys? No, you didn't see that. So I'm going to focus on millennials. And there's a good reason why I focus on them. There are 2 billion of them. There are a lot of them. Okay? So let's get inside the millennial mind. Here's a Time magazine cover from 2013. Look at that. The me generation. Millennials are lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents. And just underneath that it says, why they'll save us all. And that sums up pretty much what that generation's about. So here's that generation born between 1981 and 1997, in other words, between the ages of 25 and 41. Okay? 2 billion of them. We used to think that they were weirdos. We used to say, don't worry, they're going to grow up one day and become more like us. They're different. But look at this. This is Unilever. We don't think of them as special or different anymore. They are the core of our business. And by the way, Unilever sells soap powder. Okay? They are the core of our business. I want to read this to you. Traditional behavior patterns are gone. This generation not only highly values experiences, but they are increasingly spending time and money on them. For this group, happiness isn't as focused on possessions or career status. Living a meaningful, happy life is about creating, sharing, and capturing memories earned through experiences that span the spectrum of life's opportunities. And that famous little hashtag, YOLO. You only live once. Okay? By the way, a lot of the stuff that you heard yesterday and today fits right inside here. I want you, please, to think of that stuff as I show you this generational stuff. You're going to recognize a lot of it. It's quite remarkable. So, values that are stronger for millennials on the left-hand side: happiness, passion, diversity, sharing, and discovery. On the right-hand side, values that are stronger for older generations: justice, integrity, family, practicality, duty. Boring. Experience, duty. Completely different. Purpose, function. Totally different. Why? What? Completely different. So I'm going to look at a couple of behaviors which I think are very relevant to our industry. Number one, environmental awareness has increased. It's quite remarkable how this 17-year-old Swedish school kid has grabbed attention with her talk about the environment. It's remarkable. I loved seeing images and footage of her fighting with Donald Trump. It gave me just unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. Okay? But look at that. Person of the year, 17 years old. However, environmental activism is giving way to environmentally active behavior, and that is very different. To be active about the environment is to talk about it. I'm talking about doing something about it in your everyday purchase behavior. Good for me, good for the planet. The other massive trend. Any city in the world, that's what you're going to see. Guys riding their bicycles, on their back is a backpack, and inside there are their long pants. And they're wearing short pants to work, ties at the top, a jacket, and they're going to change at work. And they do that every day. Clean food, massive trend. I don't have to tell you about that. Massive trend. That's a photograph I took in New York. I won't read it to you, but it's all about being against GMOs. Veganism, massively huge trend. And it's not just about animal rights or the environment. It's about well-being, but it's also just about being cool. Veganism is cool. This, by the way, is a restaurant in New York. It's vegan, and it's called The Butcher's Daughter. It does very well, by the way. I think we're all recognizing now that that's probably the planet's worst cause of pollution, which is why you've got stuff like this, the Impossible Burger. And I want to read what it says underneath here. It says, no more compromises. What they are promising is the full meat experience. It's not as though they're going to take something out of it. They will give you the full meat experience without the meat. No compromises. That's the other massive trend. In the old days, when we thought about vegan restaurants, we thought about that. Some kind of place where hippies might hang out, no animal cruelty up on the wall in the kitchen, dirty food, not exactly the kind of place you want to be. Okay? Here's a restaurant in Los Angeles, which is 100% vegan, called Crossroads. Some of you might know it. And here's what the chef says. He says, Crossroads is defined not by what's missing, but by what it is. That's terribly important. We don't take stuff out. We create something different and good. Okay? And I want you to think about the last 2 days and stuff we listened to. By the way, those are items from the menu at Crossroads. Not bad. Not bad at all. The Tesla is defined not by what's missing, but by what it is. There's nothing wrong with the Tesla, even though it doesn't use gasoline. It's not a compromise. Not even in terms of the range it's got. The range is not bad. I did some work on vegan products. This is work on a vegan cheese. And this is what we said. Vegans are just like everyone else, only harmless. Defined by what they are. Okay? By the way, this cheese went on to become the world's largest selling vegan cheese. It's called Violife. It's produced in Drama in northern Greece. The company was recently sold to Unilever. It's going remarkably well. We got around legislation, by the way, on packaging. You'll see that it says over here, just like mature cheddar slices. You're not allowed to call a vegan cheese cheddar. So we said just like cheddar. Okay? Kind of worked. Shared responsibility. We've heard a lot about that during the past few days. And I want to read this. In the past decade, we've witnessed a stunning transition as corporate social responsibility has evolved from a nice-to-have silo to a fundamental strategic priority for businesses large and small. You must be corporately responsible in today's world. It's no choice. In fact, I think that word corporate social responsibility is terrible. It's not a responsibility. We need to show corporate social leadership. I hate that other word. Great example is this. Toms. You buy a pair of Toms, they give another pair to somebody who needs shoes. Doing good is good for business. That's the way it is. This, to me, is the most significant trend and one that I really, really urge you to be very careful of. Consumers have a voice. That's a typical photograph today, and it's all down to this little product over here. Steve Jobs said, let's make a dent on the universe, and they certainly made a dent on the universe with this. Look at this. This is some research done amongst millennials in the US. And the question was, what's the most indispensable item in your life? 96% the smartphone. I can't do it without it. Number 2, the toothbrush. Number 3, deodorant. In other words, smelly connected people. The internet, laptop, the car, social networks, television, and coffee. Do me a favor. That's the reality. TV, no signal. You can't tell the world how you want to be perceived. You will be perceived the way you are. Because this is the new TV. And by the way, this is something we must learn to live with. I'm going to give you an example of something that went horribly wrong. This guy over here, Dave Carroll, second-rate country and western singer from the US. He flew on United Airlines. By the way, their slogan is Fly the Friendly Skies. They broke his guitar. He claimed for a new guitar, $3,000 by the way. They refused to give him one, so he made this video.
plane departed Halifax, connecting in Chicago's O'Hare. While on the ground, a passenger said from the seat behind me, "My God, they're throwing guitars out there." The band and I exchanged a look, best described as terror, at the action on the tarmac, and knowing whose projectiles these would be. So before I left Chicago, I alerted 3 employees who showed complete indifference towards me. United, united, you broke my Taylor guitar. United, united, some big help you are. You broke it, you should fix it. You're liable, just admit it. I should have flown with someone else or gone by car. 'Cause United breaks guitars.
So I should have flown with someone else or gone by car, because United breaks guitars. He puts it on YouTube and he gets 22 million views. It's picked up by CNN, CBS, NBC, ABC, and every other network in the US. It becomes the #1 song on iTunes. #1. He publishes a book called United Breaks Guitars. And shareholders lose $180 million in value, which incidentally would have bought more than 51,000 replacement guitars. Very expensive mistake. And they carry on advertising Fly the Friendly Skies. Come on. A couple of years ago, they dragged a passenger off a United Airlines flight. This happened in 2018, I believe. They'd overbooked the flight. They dragged this guy off because he wouldn't get off the plane. This time, somebody filmed it, put it up on social media, and they lost $1.8 billion. And they still say, "Fly the friendly skies." What's wrong with these guys? In today's world, you are no longer who you say you are. You are who people say you are. You need to find yourself from deep within. It's not about coming up with clever little slogans and stuff. It doesn't count. If you want people to speak about you, do things that people will like speaking about. And remember the key millennial trends. Good for me, good for the planet. No more compromises, shared responsibility, and never forget that consumers have a voice. Think also about what I spoke about, the values, happiness, passion, diversity, sharing, discovery, YOLO, you only live once, and then build a shared belief, a value system with a motivating narrative to connect with people within your ecosystem, for example, the olive oil industry, or the island of Lesbos, or your company, whatever that ecosystem might be. Create a belief system and a value system with a motivating narrative. Make sure it's honest and authentic. You're not flying the friendly skies unless you really do it. This allows you consistency in your narrative, but incredible agility in your ability to respond to changing situations, because you're consistent in your narrative. It goes back to Aristotle again. Ethos, logos. I like to look at brand like this. It's a bridge into your future. It's the way in which you move from where you are today to where you want to be in the future. It creates a narrative bridge that you can travel down, that you can take people with you. Please remember something: if you don't do it, someone else will. The stuff I'm talking about, the whole world knows it. And that's how we will create exactly this. Just a word of warning, I've spoken about millennials. After this comes Gen Z, okay, and they're coming fast. And here's what I found the other day. Entire industries and businesses will rise and fall in the wake of the Gen Zers, yet few industries or organizations seem to be ready for it. Are you? Have we really thought about under 25-year-olds yet? And after that comes this. Help, my parents are millennials. That's Gen Alpha. So the worst is yet to come. I love this quote from, we overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years, and we underestimate what will occur in the next 10. And Bill Gates says, don't let yourself be lulled into inaction. I think that's really very true. And here I want to close with this quote from a client of mine, Steve Squeri. I did some work on American Express a few years ago. He said, respect the past, enhance it, but don't preserve it. It's past, present, future. Take what you need to take with you. Forget the rest. Thank you very much for that.